Hello, everyone, and welcome to Freedback Friday, the Rundown Freedback Friday edition. I will be your host today, Craig DeLuz, coming at you from the West Coast, the left coast, behind the Iron Curtain, otherwise known as the Sierras. But as we all know, I do not do this program by myself.
Hey everybody, Mike Peworski coming to you live from the East Coast, the coast with the most, because I'm the co-host with the most from the East Coast here on the Rundown, where we bring you 2A views of conservative news. It's great to be with you here on Feedback Friday.
Excellent. So, folks, this is going to be a very special Freeback Friday because, we are going to be going to SHOT. This is our first pre-SHOT show, Freeback Friday.
It is. It is. And next Friday, we'll have a SHOT show, Feedback Friday. So how cool is that?
Yes, that is going to be. It's going to be an interesting one, to say the least. After a week of SHOT, it will definitely be a very interesting thing, and we'll actually be kicking off the week with a fun day on Monday, as we've talked about numerous times. That there's going to be an event, and this event is going to be a pre-SHOT party. That's right. So come join us at the Hofbrau House there in Las Vegas. Come have a pre-SHOT shot with us. Hosted by our sponsors, the folks over there, Guerrilla Machining, Grid Defense, 2A News. We're also going to be joining us as sponsors. Is going to be Arms Room Radio, Gun Tech USA, Keltec, as well as Next Level Training. Now, I understand that some of our sponsors are going to have some very, very cool stuff for us, aren't they, Mike?
Yes, they are. Got some giveaways, got some cool stuff. I don't want to ruin too much of it, but if you're looking for products, these guys got products. Guys and gals got products. So we'll be doing some giveaways. We'll be doing some challenges, some trivia. We'll just be having a good old time over there at the Hofbrau House.
Exactly. So please remember to join us. That's Monday, January 17th. Starting at 7 p.m. They've asked us to move the event up an hour to 7 p.m. So that's what we're doing. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So you guys want to make sure you want to get there. We're going to be doing some interviews. We're going to be obviously having a few little competitions and contests. It'll be fun. You do not have to have a credential for SHOT in order to be able to attend this event.
No, you do not. No, you absolutely do not. It's just be in Vegas, be at the Hofbrau, tell them you're there for the party, and then they'll show you to the courtroom in the back.
Exactly. Good times.
Now, Craig, next Friday, I've got a prediction of how we're going to look and how we're going to sound next Friday.
How are we going to look and sound?
A lot of this. Craig, how's your?
You're going to have to turn up your microphone. I can barely. That's usually actually it usually doesn't hit me until I get back. So usually once I get home, and then it's like I hit the couch and pretty much stay there for a day and a half.
I've pretty much got a good voice on Thursday through Thursday evening, and then Friday when I sit down at the microphone, open my mouth, and nothing comes out. Anybody that's ever watched Arms Room Radio or seen us how we do it before, whoever I'm interviewing, I literally hand them a list of questions and I make them interview themselves.
You make them interview themselves.
Or I grab one person and make them interview the other. It's just
fun stuff. I'm sure a lot of fun will be had. Having said that, we're about 4 minutes in now. It's probably about time that we actually got to the news, perhaps, maybe, possibly. Well, let's start off with the first story, probably the biggest story that's going on right now, and that is President Biden's vaccine mandate for employers over 100 employees has been shot down. The Supreme Court has come out and says, nah. I'm sorry, but OSHA does not have the authority to do this stuff that you want them to do. And I think this is important to understand, that this is less about the efficacy of the vaccines than it is about separation of powers. What the president attempted to do in this particular case was to basically have a part of the executive branch actually pass legislation or create legislation or change the law. And the fact is that this simply did not fall within the purview of what OSHA was supposed to be doing. And so the Supreme Court has told them, nah, you don't get to do that. And it was obviously a decision 6-3. The six conservative, well, 5 conservative, 1 I don't know what you would call the Chief Justice,
Fence
but they
sitter.
but pretty much that what they decided was, yeah, no, you don't get to just do it just because you think it's a good thing. That's just not within your powers.
Yeah, now this means all the employers that were subject to this mandate, those that were 100 or over, can now tell them to pound sand. The ones this does apply to, Craig, and we pretty much knew this was going to happen, was federal agencies, anybody in federal buildings, anybody that's around around the feds. That they do have the authority to say that you have to have the vaccine there requirement. So there's a that minor piece that's still attached. But again, we knew that the president had the authority to order federal workers and federal buildings and federal properties to comply. So that really wasn't at question. But that's what the administration is going to lock on to, I'm sure.
Well, exactly. And this, that, once again, this goes to the whole point of what is within his purview, what is within his authority, and what is not. And, to be quite honest, more important than the vaccine is what is within his authority to mandate. And I think that when you have a government that continues, as Biden has attempted to do over and over again, and people don't realize how many times he's been shot down by the Supreme Court and by the courts in terms of some of the stuff that he's trying to do. He's clearly trying to exceed his authority. Executive order does not mean that you get to just write law. It's you get to do what is within the law. You can put things in place in order to help implement and enforce that law, but you don't get to write law in the executive. If you want to do that, he needs to go back to the Senate. I don't know if he not smart enough to know this. I don't know if he just doesn't care, or maybe he just forgot.
He doesn't realize he's not in the Senate anymore. That's the
He
problem.
doesn't realize he's not in the Senate anymore. Yeah. That is highly possible. That is most definitely a possibility. But in any case, employers. And by the way, there are some employers, these corporate leftists, these statists, these fascists, that actually wanted the government to enforce these things so that they could require their employees and say, it's not us, it's the government. So just so you guys know, so any of these employers who continue to mandate this stuff, now you know it was because they wanted to do it, not because the government was forcing them. They actually, in some cases, asked the government to do it.
One of those, Craig. It's one of those where you had liberal-owned corporations, right? That wanted to see this done, but didn't want to be the bad guy, so they were hoping the government would be the bad guy for them.
Yep.
And now it's not. Now listen, this doesn't preclude those individual companies from saying we're going to make the mandate internally as a company.
Right.
And we know what the Supreme Court said before about that. Listen, if the individual company decides they want to do this, so far they've said you have the right to work elsewhere. So
right. Exactly.
It's been allowed by them. So this doesn't mean that those big companies now won't turn around and say, we're going to make it the mandate anyway. So and you still have to fight that.
That is an excellent point. But that's what happens when you have a Supreme Court or justices that actually rule based on the Constitution and the law, as opposed to just doing what the people on their side want. Because, like the justices, the left-leaning justices do, they pretty much do whatever their side wants, whatever they believe to be right, not whatever they believe to be constitutional and legal.
Correct. Absolutely right.
They believe their job is to judge from on high according to their own values, beliefs,
legislate from the bench.
Ignorance. Right, legislate from the bench. Exactamundo. Moving right along, our good friend Alec Baldwin is back in the news. That's right. An interesting thing has happened. Now, Mike, you and I talked a lot about what went on here in terms of trying to identify the degree of fault that various different people had when it came to the shooting that took place on a film set, the film set of Rust. They were in New Mexico. And we all agreed, I think, that there were a number of people who were at fault, but obviously the person who pulled the trigger is the most accountable, or should be held the most accountable. We talked about, who was supposed to make sure that there were not that the firearms were in safe condition and yada yada yada. But we all know that the individual who actually pulls the trigger has the primary responsibility to make sure the firearm ain't loaded. That it is in safe condition before they put their booger picker on the bang stick. Well, it turns out now that we've got information that Alec Baldwin may be more culpable than we thought, as noted in the Mercury News that Alec Baldwin ignored gun training requests before the fatal shooting, and by the way, still hasn't turned over his phone. There's probably a reason why he hasn't turned over his phone. It's because the allegation is that Baldwin skipped the gun training. He skipped the firearms safety training that was supposed to put him in a position where he would be able to be safe with the firearm. And I think, Mike, the fact that he is also an executive producer even opens him up even more to some liability, culpability, both criminally and civilly.
Yeah, yeah. Listen, he's not giving up that phone because he's dead to rights. He's probably got an iPhone, so we know it's well protected. That even the feds can't get in there, and that Apple won't give them, even with a subpoena, Apple won't give them the access to it. So they're waiting for him to turn over that phone, and he's not going to. They're going to fight that either way. It's pretty clear now from Supreme Court rulings that you have to have a subpoena to get somebody's phone and get into it. You can't just go through it anymore, like it was somebody's wallet or something like that. So, yeah, Craig, listen, criminally, I've said since day one, criminally, he is 100% liable criminally for this. The gun was in his hand. He pulled the trigger. And civilly, it all comes back to 100% from him. You know, he pulled the trigger. He's the executive producer. It's his production company. He's the one that hired the firearms experts. It comes back 100% to him. Civilly. Now they may spread that around where some might come out of this bank account, which is the production company, and some might come out of his personal bank account, but it rolls back up to 100% being his fault on both sides, civil and criminal.
Right. Now, what they point out in the article is that specifically he was doing what was called a cross draw move. And that's what the specific area of training that he was supposed to be getting some training on, and that he refused to actually get this. Now, the interesting thing about this is, Mike, is that apparently he has tried to, even though he's anti-gun, he has tried to portray himself as, it says here in the article, Alec Baldwin has depicted himself as a seasoned veteran on gun safety on film, which basically means that he's a know-it-all, or he thought he knew it all. But apparently that's not the case.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. And you can go back through and the one that I use as a reference is it goes back a while, The Hunt for Red October. Now I know that's movie's 20, 25 years old, but you can see him, doing all sorts of gun safety errors even on camera. And it wasn't like it was meant to be. He was meant to be playing a military officer who obviously would have known how to handle that firearm, and he was not. So to say that he's had gun safety training before for firearms, all you have to do is look at his other movies and know that's not true.
Well, it's funny because I think everybody thinks they know a lot until they actually come across somebody who actually does. I've learned this in my life, and it doesn't really matter what area it is. The more I learn, the more I learn about that area, the more I learn how little I really actually know.
Right. Yeah. Very true.
Very true, right? In particular, when it comes to firearms,
when you learn something new and you smack yourself in the head, going, "How did I not know that?
How did I not know that?" Or the worst part is that the stuff that you start to take for granted, right?
Yeah.
The little things, because oftentimes it's the little things that get you in trouble. Like, oh, I don't know, checking to make sure the firearm isn't loaded.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Oh, somebody unloaded it earlier this morning. This will be okay. All right. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, ultimately, you're the one that is responsible. I mean, when I've been on film sets, whether directing or whatnot, if there is a firearm, if I'm an actor and I'm utilizing a firearm, I check to make sure it is not loaded. Not only do I check, but I'll have the guy next to me look. Stick your finger in there. Make sure there's no round in there. Right. Ooh. I always do that so that you can have multiple people say, and if I were to set that firearm down somewhere at the prop table and then pick it back up, I'm going to go through the same exact process. Exactly. Because I don't know what happened to that firearm while it was sitting there.
Yeah. If he had done the safety training, he would have known that.
Yes, exactly. But hey, he's a know-it-all. So know-it-alls pretty much, well, I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
Okay, moving right along, we're going to move over to January 6th. Obviously, January 6th is something that's going to be new in the news forever. And, turns out in any particular shooting, in particular, whether it's an officer-involved shooting or whether it's a civilian involved shooting, it's of self, quote unquote, of self defense or defense of property. Standard procedure, Mike, correct me if I am wrong, but standard procedure is you're going to take a moment and you're actually going to interview the person who pulled the trigger, right? Or at least attempt to interview them.
You would attempt, yes. There's always the chance that the individual who pulled the trigger says no, no, I don't want to be interviewed for a number of reasons. One, they do not have to, under Fifth Amendment, obviously give up to be interviewed. And we know the rights under Miranda as well. Or they could be, listen, it's a traumatic event for them, and they don't feel they're in a healthy place yet, in a full state of mind, and they can say no. So it's not super common that it happens, but it does happen where the person who pulls the trigger doesn't get interviewed. But there's usually a reason. It's not, oh, we just didn't do it.
Well, they're eventually going to get interviewed, right? Though, I mean, they not get interviewed then at the scene, but they're eventually going to be interviewed, right?
Well, they can. I'll say this because I know where we're going. They can request to interview them, and the person can say, "No, I do not want to be interviewed."
Okay,
because
right.
You don't have to. Right?
They have a Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination.
So here's how it works for law enforcement officers. All right.
Okay.
They have administrative rights and they have their civil rights. If you say, I'm not going to testify, I'm not going to be interviewed, and you just sit there with your arms crossed, they're going to say, okay, well, we can't charge you criminally for not being interviewed. There is no crime for not being interviewed. They may find that you didn't provide any information to the contrary that helps or hinders their investigation. That'll have to come out with the state attorney, district attorney, and the courts. But on the flip side, their administrative policy says you must tell them what happened or you'll be suspended or fired. Well, I'll tell you what, some guys decide, you know what, I'll risk the suspension rather than risk stepping on my tongue and ending up in jail.
Well, and so as it turns out, in this particular case, the individual who the officer who wound up shooting Ashley Babbitt, that was the unarmed protester who was attempting to enter the Capitol. He was never interviewed by police before being cleared of any wrongdoing, and that's basically what the report said. Now, I'm just finding this odd because now, once again, I think the first interview that we heard was the one that he basically did on television, where he said, I couldn't see her hands. So in other words, he didn't know if she was armed or not. As far as we know, it's disputed whether or not he actually gave a warning to the individual who was coming through, to Ashley Babbitt. I just find it kind of odd that this individual would be cleared. I'm not saying I find it odd that he would be. I don't find it odd that he would be cleared. I don't find it odd that he would not be interviewed. I do, however, find it odd that he would be cleared without having been interviewed.
Yes, that's peculiar. And again, the question here is, did they neglect to interview him, or did they request to interview him and he said no? Because if they request to interview him and he said no, again, you cannot be held criminally liable for not being interviewed. There is no charge for not being interviewed. However, there's administrative violations for refusing to comply with the investigation internally.
Right. And
so
according,
listen, this is very, very, I know this is very confusing, but it's very distinct for law enforcement. There's a line right down the middle. All right. You ask to interview me and I say no, I'm getting suspended. But you're not putting me in jail for anything I said either.
Well, but he didn't even give them a statement, a written statement, nothing. I mean, we're talking there was absolutely no input from him. So how can you say he believed that he was under threat or that she was a threat when you didn't even talk to him? You didn't even ask him, did you believe she was a threat? Yes, I believe she was a threat. Okay, you're off. I mean, you didn't even get that.
Well, and again, listen, you know how I feel about this, and how this guy was clearly in the wrong here, as far as I'm concerned. But I'm just explaining to you where the law stands on interviews and interrogations, or investigative interviews, as they're called now.
Right.
My question again, back to you and back to the story is: did they even attempt to interview him? Was there an attempt and he said no, or did they just neglect to do it because they said, listen, we're going to clear him anyway. Let's just go out here and have a sham of an investigation and say he's cleared.
Well, and that's the thing they don't point out in the article is they don't
Right.
point out whether or
That's
not he
that's
was
what the article's missing. Correct.
Yes. Did they attempt to interview him?
Correct. Very
And-
important to know because
Yes.
again, he has the right to say, no, I won't be interviewed. I won't be interviewed.
Wow. Once again, now let's say that this was a law enforcement officer who shot a BLM protester,
Right.
right? You're telling me that they would have been cleared and they would have gotten away with, the media would not be going crazy. Because keep in mind, this isn't reported in the mainstream media. This was reported on the Independent Journal Review. You were not seeing this. Nobody on MSNBC is saying this. Nobody on CBS, ABC, NBC. Nobody on any of the major news stations is pointing out the fact that this guy was never actually interviewed.
Yeah. It would have been the opposite, Craig.
Right. Oh, yeah.
That if he had shot a white cop had shot a BLM member, there also would have been no interview because they would have been too busy arresting him and charging him at the state attorney's office.
Exactly.
Just like we saw in the Gray case in Maryland, just like we saw with Derek Chauvin. And I know Chauvin ended up being found guilty, but he was arrested 2 days later, and nobody asked him a question ahead of time.
Well, they did interview him the day of, and they gave their statements regarding the death the day of. My point is, you ought anyway. We ought to be treating these incidents the same, and the idea that this guy got, at the very least, someone in the mainstream media, needs to publicly be talking about the fact that this guy never was interviewed before he was cleared.
Well, again, listen, there's a different standard for law enforcement. They have two masters they have to answer to. They have to answer to criminal law, and they have to answer to their administrative policy within their agencies. And again, if you came to me after a shooting and said, we want to talk to you about this shooting, and I said, no, I'm probably getting suspended. All right. But you're not going to be charging me for what you said.
Well, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to, because one of the things you learn is when there is a shooting, what you want to do is, first of all, the adrenaline's pumping and all of that's going on. The first thing you want to do is you want to get with your attorney. Not because you're trying to cover anything up, but because you need to get beyond the adrenaline rush. And the idea is you need to then identify, okay, what exactly happened, put it in order so that you can give a statement that is truthful and consistent, right? That's what's vital. And you don't accidentally say something that might might make your story suspect. Those are the things that any good defense attorney is going to tell you. Once again, it's not about covering up, it's not about lying, but it's about recognizing that in the heat of the moment, you don't always remember things the way in which they actually happened. And a good defense attorney is going to help you do that.
Right. And we can go for hours and hours on that. The first thing you want to do is render first aid if possible.
Exactly.
The
second
thing you want to do,
as far as I know,
is
no
remember
first
one
aid was
word.
rendered in this particular case.
Yeah. That's right. So the first thing you want to do is render first aid if possible. If possible. It may not be feasible.
Well,
and the second thing is remember one word: lawyer. And that's all you have to do is say that word over and over.
Exactly.
Lawyer.
Exactly. And we know
take days. Folks, if you're involved in a shooting, 2-3 a week until you've calmed down, you get everything in order, you've had a chance to go, and they may pressure you. Listen, if you don't tell us, we may think you're the guilty one, might have to put you in jail. Okay. Jail for the night. I'd rather be in the jail for the night than in jail forever because you mistook what I said while I was excited and full of adrenaline.
Right. And keep in mind, and this is the thing, and I hate to say this, but understand this, that when they are interviewing you as the shooter, they're looking for something that might make you guilty of a crime. Their primary concern is not your civil rights. It's not finding you innocent.
Yeah, it's your recitation of the facts. Yep.
Right. Exactly. So anyway, moving right along, talk about recitation of the facts. One of my favorite interviewers, one of the favorite folks I like to listen to online is Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan is one of the best interviewers out there. He really is. Well, he recently had a guest on, Dr. Maloney. He's the creator of the mRNA vaccine, the technology that's actually used to create the vaccines. And He's raised a number of questions and raised a number of concerns by people because of, well, his position and basically mostly the questions that he's raised regarding the vaccine. And now, mind you, Joe Rogan is known to have controversial people on the right or on the left. He is a person who very much believes in having people on, in particular, even if he disagrees with them, because he wants to ask them questions and wants to kind of pick their brain on why they believe what they believe. And needless to say, ever since he signed his deal with Spotify, a lot of the employees over there at Spotify are really kind of don't like him, are pissed at him, and have threatened to walk out if his show is not censored or removed. Well, now there are a bunch of, now they say scientists, right? But they're saying Joe Rogan interviewed a doctor, and now there's a bunch of quote unquote doctors and scientists that say it's time for Spotify to better police his podcast because they believe. Now, by the way, Dr. Malone was kicked off Twitter because, well, his positions don't exactly fit the vaccine good, government good, get the jab no matter what rhetoric. Now, once again, if there's anybody who is qualified to talk about this, one would think it's the guy who invented the technology. And 9 times out of 10, he's not even really doubting it. He's just raising what are considered legitimate questions with how the vaccine came to market, how why it's being forced on everybody, and all of that. And so now they're trying to, the folks once again at Spotify trying to remove. And by the way, I don't know if you ever listened to Joe Rogan, Mike. Joe Rogan is not a conservative by any stretch of the imagination.
He's a libertarian,
Yeah.
He kind of goes both ways. I think Joe a lot of times is in it for the entertainment value. What's going to get the best ratings? What's going to get people listening?
Oh yeah, no, he is definitely in it for the entertainment value. Yeah. But I thought this guy raised some very legitimate questions, and they're questions that they're the type of questions that, for example, a year ago when we were talking about hydroxychloroquine and we were talking about later last year we were talking about ivermectin. He's raising questions that are legitimate questions that the pharmaceutical industry doesn't want to answer, the government doesn't want to answer. And because you ask those questions, all of a sudden now you're deemed to be anti-science and anti-vaccine and therefore anti-science.
I say, listen, right, we want to go with the scientists, right? But the scientists I want to hear from are Van Spengler and Stantz. That's the ones I want to hear from. Those are my favorite. Well,
it's funny because one of the areas in which he raises a question has to do with, he talks about this quote unquote mass formation psychosis, right? Yeah. And I don't know if this is a formal thing or anything like that, but you have psychologists who are like, that's not such a thing. But I think we only need to look at the misinformation that's come out from the left and from the media, the stuff that we have found that actually has people on the left believing, for example, things like the fact that COVID is 70 times more deadly than it actually is. That you literally have people who are in fear of their lives over a disease from which, by the worst estimation, 98% of the people survive. And yet they act like if you get it, you're going to be on your deathbed, that half the people who get it are going to be dying.
And we get this. We know this. It's crap. It's all about the science, yet they don't follow the science. The nature of science itself is to challenge what we know and see what the real truth is. But we don't do that. Well, you don't trust the science? I do trust science. And science says maybe we should question certain items to see if they're real. Otherwise, guess what? We still live on a flat disc and the sun revolves around us. If you just want to trust the science instead of rather than examine the science, then let's bloodlet. Let's get some leeches out here and fix the COVID. Let's do it that way. It's ridiculous when they talk about it. It's political science, it's science fiction, it's anything but science for liberals.
Well, and as we've come to find out, even people who were formerly working in the Biden administration are recognizing that their messaging is all over the place because, once again, they don't know the science. And part of the thing about science is you have to admit, all we know is what we know right now. And what we know right now could change. It could change in the next hour. It could change in the next day, month, or year. How about just acknowledging that this is what we know right now? Instead of speaking with a level of certainty about anything, right? There are certain things that we know over time. Like, for example, they came back on talking about hydroxychloroquine, but they acted like, oh, well, it's not safe. Well, no, it's clearly safe because we've been using it for decades. Millions of
Yeah.
people have taken it. All right,
Yeah.
let's not acting like we know that ivermectin is a horse dewormer because oh, by the way, it is something that has been used in people for people. Once again, millions of doses over
Yeah.
many years.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly right.
Time when an idea, when a theory survives time, that's when you can become more certain about it. And all he's done, all this Dr. Malone has done is just raise very legitimate questions. And I think the reason why Joe Rogan had him on was because he raises the very same questions and just wants to
Yeah.
get, okay, give me the science behind it, behind those questions. But hey, we don't
Very
do
true.
science anymore.
Yeah.
Or at least
Very
we
true.
claim to do science. We just don't actually do science anymore.
No, like I said, science fiction, political science. That's about it.
Pretty much, pretty much. Moving right along. Now we all know, all right, we're in the era of it's just funny to me to see the left be so sensitive and be so tolerant. We all know. We did the story yesterday about the students at Western Carolina University who are being attacked by faculty and faculty staff and students because of their questioning of wokeness, right? We've also
Right.
seen how people have gone after though individuals who do the "Let's Go Brandon" thing, who say "Let's go Brandon," talk about how vulgar they are. Well, there's a degree of hypocrisy there, Mike, and
Yeah.
I think that
Yeah.
leads us to our parting shot, where I, I still remember, I still remember Robert De Niro. I think it was the Golden Globes or it was the Academy Awards, the SAG Awards, basically saying "F Donald Trump," right? Here we
Yep.
had 4 years ago, we had Democrats saying he's not a legitimate president. He's not the president. But then Republicans come with "Let's go Biden," and well, they wanted to cry them as not having appropriate decorum. Um, Mike, dost thou smell some hypocrisy here?
Oh, clearly, this is what we expect from them, right? This is Kathy Griffith holding the severed head of Trump up, Yet, but by saying the words "Let's go, Brandon," we've far exceeded what she did in her vulgarities. And it's absolutely a double standard here. It's a hypocrisy at its finest, and they have perfected it as they practice their science of hypocrisy every day on improving it.
Yeah, but to them, they just don't see it. And that goes once again into the when we talk about the quote unquote mass formation psychosis,
Yeah,
that's exactly what it is. The people who
yeah,
that see what happened on January 6th as a violent riot, but don't see the 575 riots that took place during the 575 riots that
yeah.
took place during the summer of 2020, the George Floyd riots. Yeah, no, those were mostly peaceful protests.
Mostly peaceful.
Those were mostly
Mostly
peaceful
only a
protests.
little arson, just mostly peaceful.
Exactly. They see the Proud Boys as a violent extremist group, but Antifa, well, they
Yeah,
actually don't really exist. They're not really a thing.
that's right. That's right. Yeah,
And saying "F Donald Trump"
yeah,
is clearly an exercise in free speech,
yeah.
while "Let's Go Brandon" is vulgar and inappropriate.
Right. Yeah, you're right. You are right, Craig. You speak the truth. You speak the
Speak
truth.
the truth. Speak the truth. All right, folks. Well, hey, folks, the next time you see us, we's gonna be in Vegas. We're gonna be doing our thing from Shot Show there in Las Vegas, Nevada. Once again, encourage you guys stop by the party on Monday night. Come by, say hello. If you're going to be at Shot, now we're actually there's not going to be a media row this time, is there? Or at least not where we have been in the past, right?
It's a media zone with Beretta backing out because of the COVID things, with them trying to get over from Italy. There's a very, very large piece of footprint on the floor down there that we are going to be in. So it's going to be more towards the center of the floor, over towards Glock in that area. If anybody's going to be in the shows, but the media zone will be actually down on the floor, roped off with people having to get the special passes to come and see us. So it's unique. I've done a lot of shows from the floor. I've done a lot of shows from a radio row, and I think this is going to be a unique experience for SHOT Show, and I'm really looking forward to it.
I am looking forward to it as well. So, folks, hey, like I said, if you're going to Shot, hit us up in the comments. Let us know that you're going to be at Shot. And if you are not going to be at SHOT, but you're going to be in Vegas, make sure you're there Monday night, Hofbrauhaus, 7 p.m. Join us, join all of our sponsors, and let's have a good time. And remember to like, remember to share, remember to subscribe, remember to listen to us on podcasts wherever you get your podcasts. So you can watch us, you can listen to us, you can even see us live, come together and shake our hands. We're gonna have a good time. Please make sure you guys tune in and encourage your friends to do the same.
Yeah, come view us on Monday. I think it's going to be shot like a Blair Witch Project kind of thing. So we're really looking forward to it.
Okay, gonna be a lot of fun. We'll talk to you guys later. We'll see you on Monday.